August 17, 1859. The largest slave auction house in Savannah fell silent the moment lot number 43 stepped onto the platform. That sweltering afternoon, 27 bidders had their paddles ready, yet within minutes, only a single hand remained in the air. Standing there in chains was a woman who was young and healthy, possessing invaluable domestic skills. Her starting price had been deliberately set low. Yet, something made every plantation owner in that room lower their eyes and step back. It was something they knew. Something they whispered about in the corridors, but never dared to speak aloud. One man, newly arrived from Charleston, hadn't heard those whispers. For a woman worth $200, he paid just $12. Within 6 months, he would come to understand why silence had filled that auction house, and by then, it would be far too late to save himself. Now, before we continue with the story of what happened in Chatham County that year, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because every single week, we bring you stories like this one, pulled from the darkest corners of American history. And leave a comment down below, telling us what state or city you're watching from. I'm curious to know just how far these tales of terror travel. Now, let me tell you about the purchase that changed everything. Since its establishment in 1842, the auction house on Broughton Street had seen thousands of transactions, but the events of that August afternoon would be remembered differently from any other sale. Inside the building, the air was thick with unwashed bodies, tobacco smoke, and a fear that no amount of whitewash could ever cover. But that day, there was something else. Something the regular attendees noticed immediately, a tension that made even the most hardened slave traders shift uncomfortably in their seats. By 1859, Savannah stood as one of the South's most prosperous cities, its wealth built entirely on cotton and forced labor. Each year, the city's port handled millions of pounds of the white crop, and the plantations surrounding it competed viciously for the most productive workers. The soil of Chatham County was rich, its growing season long, and its plantation owners were ruthless in their pursuit of profit. 3 weeks before that fateful auction, Thomas Cornelius Pute had arrived in Savannah. At 34 years old, he represented New Southern money, the kind that made old families uncomfortable. His father had made a fortune in Charleston through cotton speculation and died suddenly, leaving Thomas with more wealth and experience. Eager to prove himself among Georgia's planting elite, Thomas had purchased the old Waverly Plantation sight unseen. The property had come cheap, the previous owner having died without heirs, and Thomas saw it as his opportunity to build a legacy. Stretching across 800 acres of prime cotton land along the Vernon River, the Waverly estate displayed a columned grandeur in its main house, despite needing repairs. The property came with 42 enslaved people, but Thomas's overseer, a lean man named Hutchkins, advised he would need at least 60 to work the land properly for the coming season. Hence his presence at the Broughton Street auction house that August morning, cash in hand and determination in his eyes. The auction began at 10 o'clock. By noon, Thomas had bid successfully on 3 young men and an experienced cook, spending nearly $5,000. During the lunch break, he overheard a conversation between 2 planters he recognized from a dinner party the previous week. "You staying for the afternoon session?" one asked. "No reason to. Already got what I came for. Besides, I know what's coming. Heard they're finally selling her. About time. Been sitting in the holding pens for 3 weeks. Nobody wants to buy. Still can't believe what happened at the Peton place. 3 men dead inside of 2 months. For if you count old Peton himself. Though Dr. Reeves said that was his heart. Mighty convenient timing." Thomas stepped back before they could notice him, his curiosity piqued. When the auction resumed at 1 o'clock, several morning bidders had not returned. The first 3 afternoon lots sold quickly. Then came lot 43. The woman who stepped onto the platform moved with a dignity that seemed impossible given her circumstances. She appeared to be in her early 30s, her skin the color of polished walnut, her features sharp and defined. But it was her eyes that struck Thomas most, dark, almost black, possessing a quality of stillness that belonged to someone who had stopped hoping and found a different kind of strength in that hopelessness. Lot 43, the auctioneer announced without enthusiasm. Female, approximately 32 years of age, name of Celia. Experienced in household duties, particularly cooking and medical assistance. Has served as midwife and herb doctor. Literate in English. No known physical defects. Starting bid of $10. Thomas waited for raised paddles. Instead, there was only silence. For a woman with medical skills, $10 was insultingly low. Midwives were valuable, often earning owners significant income by attending births throughout the county. $10, the auctioneer repeated. Do I hear $10? The silence stretched. Men deliberately looked away, studying floors, ceilings, their own hands, anything but the woman on the platform. Thomas raised his paddle. $10 to the gentleman in the blue coat, the auctioneer said quickly, relief evident. Do I hear 12? Nothing. The room remained frozen. Going once at $10. Going twice. Sold for $10 to the gentleman in blue. The gavel cracked like a gunshot. The woman, Celia, turned her gaze toward Thomas for the first time. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps assessment. Then she was led away. After the auction, when Thomas approached the office to complete his purchases, he inquired about Celia's history. The clerk's pen paused briefly before continuing. Came from the Peton estate. Property was liquidated after Mr. Peton's death 3 months ago. And her skills are accurately listed. That's what the estate inventory stated. Seems unusual that no one else bid. The clerk looked up briefly. Not my place to question what buyers do or don't do, sir. Your total comes to $6,710. The journey to Waverly took just over an hour along the river road. As they approached, the main house came into view, a 2-story structure with 6 columns across the front portico, its white paint fading in places. Beyond lay the quarters, 2 long buildings, and further still the cotton fields stretching toward the tree-line in neat rows. Upon their arrival, Hutchkins organized the new arrivals. The men would join field gangs. The cook would take over the main house kitchen. But when it came to Celia, Hutchkins seemed uncertain. Where do you want this one, Mr. Pute? Thomas considered. She has medical training. We'll use her as a midwife. Have her set up in the old overseer's cabin near the quarters. Hutchkins nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Though we already have old patients who tends to such things. Then Celia can assist her. 2 pairs of hands are better than 1. Thomas was about to question Hutchins's reluctance when a servant approached, informing him that Josiah Crenshaw had arrived to pay his respects to the new owner. Thomas recognized the name from the conversation outside the auction house. Crenshaw waited on the front portico, a heavy-set man in his late 50s dressed in casual elegance. After exchanging pleasantries over bourbon, Crenshaw shifted the conversation. I noticed you made some purchases today. Good selections, though I sense you didn't hear all the talk about one particular acquisition. Thomas met his gaze. You're referring to Celia. For $10. Did you wonder why no one else bid? The thought crossed my mind. Crenshaw set his glass down carefully. That woman came from the Peton estate. Dr. Harold Peton died 3 months ago. Healthy until he wasn't. His nephew inherited and immediately sold everything, couldn't get away fast enough. He paused. Peton's death wouldn't have raised eyebrows by itself. But it was what came before. His overseer, a man named Kelly, dead from brain fever after 2 weeks of raving. Before that, Peton's driver, Marcus, found dead in the stables with a broken neck. They said kicked by a horse. But Marcus knew horses better than anyone. And before that, Peton's physician, Dr. Simon Vance, dead from apparent influenza complications. Thomas absorbed this. You're suggesting these deaths are connected. For men associated with the Peton household died within 2 months, and the only common thread was that woman. She prepared medicines, tonics, teas, had access to the main house, the kitchen, the sick rooms. Crenshaw leaned forward. And she had reason. What reason? About 6 months ago, Celia's daughter took ill. Pneumonia, they thought. Dr. Vance attended her. The girl died 3 days later. Celia claimed the doctor was drunk, gave the wrong treatment, killed her daughter through negligence. She made loud accusations. Peton had her whipped and confined. Crenshaw finished his bourbon. 2 weeks later, Dr. Vance was dead. Then Marcus, then Kelly, then Peton. That could be coincidence. Could be. But that woman has knowledge of herbs and plants that goes deeper than most. She knows what cures and what kills, and she's got nothing left to lose. He stood to leave. I came as a courtesy, Mr. Pute. What you do with the information is your business. But if I were you, I would sell that woman quickly or put her in the fields where she can't access anyone's food or drink. That evening, Thomas visited the overseer's cabin where Celia had been housed. She sat on the rough bed, hands unbound, her posture straight despite the day's ordeal. She stood when she saw him, but her eyes met his directly. "You are Celia," Thomas said. "Yes, master. I'm told you have skills as a midwife and herbalist. Where did you learn?" "My mother was a midwife before me. She learned from her mother. I learned from watching, then doing. And I can read, so I studied books when I could find them." Her candor surprised him. "I'm also told you came from the Plantation estate. There were several deaths there. People die, master. That's the one certain thing in this world." "Indeed, but the timing caused some talk. White folks always talk, especially when they don't understand something." "And what didn't they understand?" Celia said nothing for a long moment. "Then, they didn't understand that debts come due. One way or another, everything balances in the end." The statement could have been philosophical or threatening. Thomas decided to be direct. "Did you kill them?" She smiled slightly, without warmth. "Can't kill a man with words, master. Or with prayers. Or with hoping real hard that justice finds them. If they died, it was divine providence or their own sins catching up. I'm just a slave. I don't have the power to do anything but what I'm told. You'll work as a midwife here. Tend to the sick, deliver babies, prepare medicines as needed under old patients' supervision." "Yes, master. And Celia, whatever happened at Plantation's place, it stays there. Here at Waverly, we start fresh." "Understood." "Yes, master," she said. "Understood perfectly." That night, Thomas lay in bed thinking about Celia's daughter, dead at 16 from pneumonia or a doctor's negligence. He thought about a mother's grief and what it might drive someone to do. He thought about herbs and plants, how the same knowledge that eased pain could cause it. Most of all, he thought about 4 dead men and 1 woman with nothing left to lose. The harvest began in late September. For days, dark clouds had been building over the Atlantic. A late-season hurricane was coming. If the cotton wasn't picked before the storm hit, an entire year's profit could be destroyed. Thomas drove his workers hard, as all planters did during harvest. They rose before dawn and worked until darkness made it impossible to continue. Celia was not in the fields. Thomas had assigned her to work alongside old patients. Within a week, even Hutchkins reported they had reached an understanding. Old patient says the new woman knows her business. Knows plants and remedies patients never heard of. Asked if she could start a proper herb garden. Thomas approved it, reasoning Celia would be under patients' supervision. The garden began as a small plot behind the quarters. Comfrey for wounds, feverfew for headaches, willow bark for pain, chamomile for stomach ailments. Each plant was labeled with neat handwriting, and Celia kept a journal documenting everything. October brought the hurricane everyone expected. It struck on the 12th, massive winds that bent trees nearly horizontal and rain so thick visibility was impossible. The storm lasted 18 hours. When it passed, about 20% of the cotton had been destroyed and part of the quarter's roof was torn away. Within 2 days of the hurricane, people began falling ill. It started with children, fever, chills, violent coughing. Then it spread to adults. Within a week, 23 people were sick, including 3 house servants and Hutchkins's wife. Thomas sent to Savannah for a doctor. The young physician who arrived looked overwhelmed immediately. He prescribed rest, fluids, and regular doses of calomel. Keep them warm and dry. The fever should break in a week or so. After the doctor left, Thomas found Celia in the quarters, moving from patient to patient with patients trailing behind. She had organized them efficiently, checking temperatures, listening to breathing, examining with practiced assessment. The doctor prescribed calomel, Thomas told her. Celia didn't look up. Calomel makes it worse. Weakens them more than the fever does. It's what doctors use. Doctors kill more people than they save. You want these people to live so they can keep working. Let me treat them my way. Thomas should have been offended by her tone. Instead, he asked, what would you do differently? No calomel. Willow bark tea for fever, honey and garlic for cough, elderberry to strengthen them. Keep them hydrated with boiled water, not raw river water. And most important, keep the sickest ones separate. This illness spreads through the air. Group them too close and you'll lose everyone. It went against conventional wisdom, which held that diseases arose from bad air rather than spreading person to person. But Thomas had noticed diseases did seem to cluster in patterns. Do it your way, he said. But if people start dying, it becomes your responsibility. People dying is always someone's responsibility, Master, she replied. The question is whose? She organized the sick into 3 groups by severity, preparing teas and tonics carefully. Within 3 days, fever began breaking in the first patients. Within a week, all but 2 had recovered, both elderly and already weakened. Under conventional treatment, Thomas suspected the death toll would have been far higher. Word spread quickly. By early November, Thomas received visits from neighboring planters wanting to borrow Celia's services. He agreed, partly for neighborly relations and partly because the fees brought additional income. Celia was sent to the Mansfield Plantation for yellow fever, to the Rutledge place for a difficult childbirth, to a farm near the Augie River for a snake bite. In each case, she succeeded where others would have failed. Her reputation grew. Celia could heal what others couldn't. But reputation is dangerous, especially for someone in Celia's position. People began remembering the Peton estate. They wondered if someone who knew so much about healing might also know about the opposite. Thomas heard these whispers, but dismissed them. Celia had been professional and effective since arriving. She had saved his workers and earned him money. Whatever had happened at Peton's was past. December brought unusual cold, frost covering the fields in the mornings. The cotton harvest had been completed despite hurricane damage, and Thomas had sold his crop for a respectable price. He began to relax, feeling he had navigated his first year without major disaster. That was when the first sign appeared. Hutchkins came to the main house one Tuesday morning, his face pale and his hands shaking. Mr. Pute, you need to come to the quarters now. A crowd had gathered near the quarters' north end. They parted when Thomas approached, revealing a symbol painted on the wall in what appeared to be blood or dark red clay. The symbol was complex, a circle with lines radiating outward and smaller circles at specific points. In the center was a handprint, adult-sized fingers spread wide. What is this? Thomas demanded. An older man named Daniel stepped forward. It's a warning sign, Master. Old magic. African magic from before any of us were born. My grandmother knew of such things. Said they were dangerous, that they called on powers that didn't forget and didn't forgive. Who did this? Silence. Then Daniel said carefully, Don't know, Master. But signs like that usually mean someone's working roots, calling on the old ways. And when someone works roots, bad things follow. Thomas ordered the symbol washed away and announced severe punishment for anyone caught painting such things, but the damage was done. Fear had entered Waverly. 3 days later, Hutchkins's prize hunting dog was found dead near the well, its body stiff and mouth foaming with dried saliva. The dog had been healthy that morning. Poison, Hutchkins said flatly. Something fast-acting. A week before Christmas, a field worker named Samuel fell ill. He complained of stomach pains that grew progressively worse. By evening, he was vomiting violently, his body convulsing. Celia was summoned, but when she examined him, her expression grew grave. This isn't natural illness. He's been poisoned. Thomas felt his stomach drop. Poisoned? How? Can't say without knowing what he ate or drank, but the symptoms are consistent with several plant toxins. She looked at Thomas. The question isn't what poisoned him. The question is who gave it to him. Samuel died 3 hours later in seizures. It was a horrible death, and everyone witnessed some part of it. The fear that had been spreading now exploded into near panic. Thomas ordered an investigation, questioning everyone near Samuel that day. The results were frustratingly inconclusive. Samuel had eaten from the communal pot, drunk from the well. He had no known enemies. There was no apparent reason for anyone to want him dead. Unless, Thomas thought with growing dread, Samuel wasn't the intended target. Unless someone was simply practicing, testing methods, preparing for something larger. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to every creak, wondering what was happening on his plantation. Someone had knowledge of poisons. Someone was using it. And despite his earlier confidence, Thomas found himself thinking again about the Plantation estate and those 4 dead men. Christmas at Waverly was subdued. Thomas had planned to give the enslaved workers 3 days off with extra rations, but Samuel's death had cast a pall over everything. People accepted their gifts with muted thanks, avoiding eye contact, eager to return to the quarters where they felt safer in numbers. On Christmas evening, Thomas heard a commotion from the quarters. He grabbed his pistol and ran outside into the cold December night. A crowd had gathered near the well, their faces illuminated by torches. At the center, 2 men restrained a young woman named Ruth. She was fighting them, screaming words that didn't quite make sense, her eyes wide and unfocused. "What's happening?" Thomas demanded. Hutchkins pushed through the crowd. "She tried to throw herself down the well, sir." Daniel and Joseph caught her just in time. Ruth was perhaps 19, a house servant who worked in the laundry. Thomas had never known her to cause trouble. "Ruth, what were you doing?" She stopped struggling and turned toward him. In the torchlight, her face looked gaunt, almost skeletal. "They're coming for me. I can hear them. They're in my head, telling me what I did, showing me what's going to happen. I can't make them stop. The only way to make them stop is to..." She lunged toward the well again, but the men holding her were ready. "She's been like this for hours," a house servant said. "Started just after sunset, talking about voices and shadows and debts coming due." Debts coming due. The same phrase Celia had used months ago. Thomas felt a cold that had nothing to do with the December temperature. "Get her inside. Tie her down if necessary. And someone fetch Celia." But Celia was already there, standing at the crowd's edge, so still Thomas hadn't noticed her. She moved forward now, and the crowd parted for her. "Let me see her," Celia said. Ruth's eyes focused on Celia, and something like recognition crossed her face. You know. You understand. Tell them. Tell them what I did." "Hush now," Celia said, her voice gentle in a way Thomas had never heard. "No need to tell anyone anything. What's done is done, and what's coming will come regardless." "I didn't mean for him to die," Ruth sobbed. "I was just so angry. He had no right to touch me like that. I just wanted him to hurt like he made me hurt. I didn't know the mushrooms would kill him. I swear I didn't know." The crowd went silent. Thomas felt as if the ground had shifted. "Ruth," he said, "are you saying you poisoned Samuel?" But Ruth wasn't looking at Thomas. Her eyes were fixed on Celia, pleading and terrified. "Make it stop, please. The voices, the shadows. Make them stop." Celia touched Ruth's forehead with 2 fingers, a gesture that seemed almost ritualistic. "Can't stop what you started, child. You opened a door you didn't know was there, and now you have to walk through it. All I can do is ease the journey." "What are you talking about?" Thomas demanded. "What door?" Celia ignored him. She produced a small bottle from her pocket, uncorked it, and held it to Ruth's lips. "Drink this. It'll calm the voices, quiet the shadows. You'll sleep, and when you wake, you'll be at peace." Ruth drank obediently. Within minutes, her struggling ceased. Her eyes closed. Her breathing became slow and regular. The men carried her to an empty cabin to be watched, and the crowd dispersed slowly, whispering. Thomas grabbed Celia's arm before she could leave. "What did you give her?" "Valerian root, mostly. Chamomile, poppy extract. Things to help her sleep. She confessed to murder. She confessed to being foolish. Girl had relations with Samuel she didn't want. Got some mushrooms she thought would make him sick, teach him a lesson. Didn't realize the ones she picked were deadly. Easy to mistake if you don't know what you're looking for." Celia pulled her arm free. Now she's eaten up with guilt. Seeing things that aren't there. Hearing voices that don't exist. The mind can do terrible things when it's breaking under the weight of what it's done. You seem to know a great deal about minds breaking. Celia met his gaze steadily. I know about guilt, master. Know about what it does to people, how it twists them up inside until they can't tell what's real and what's not. I know about debts, and how they come due in ways people don't expect. She walked away, leaving Thomas with more questions than answers and a growing certainty that he was in far deeper water than he had realized. Ruth died 2 days later, still sleeping. She simply stopped breathing during the night, peacefully by all accounts. Celia examined her and declared it heart failure brought on by extreme distress. The death was ruled natural, though several workers whispered that Ruth had been allowed to die, that Celia's medicine had been something other than valerian. Thomas didn't know what to believe. Ruth had confessed to Samuel's murder, which should have brought clarity, but instead it had only deepened the mystery. How had an ignorant girl known which mushrooms to use? Where had she learned about plant toxins? The answer came slowly as Thomas observed Celia more carefully. She wasn't just a healer. She was something older and more complex, a keeper of knowledge that predated American slavery, carried across the ocean in the memories of stolen people. She knew herbs not just from books, but from generations of accumulated wisdom passed mother to daughter in secret. And she was teaching others. Thomas began to notice patterns. Women who had been sick would spend time with Celia and emerge different, more confident, more knowing. Ruth had been one of those women. January brought bitter cold and an ice storm that coated everything in crystal. The plantation operations slowed to a crawl. During this forced confinement, Thomas finally took action he should have taken months earlier. He broke into Celia's cabin while she was away treating Hutchins's wife. The cabin was meticulously organized. Dried herbs hung from ceiling beams, each bundle labeled. Bottles and jars lined shelves. A worktable held a mortar, pestle, measuring spoons, a small scale. But there was more. Hidden beneath the bed, Thomas found a wooden box wrapped in cloth. Inside were notebooks, their pages covered with Celia's writing, medical notes, mostly. But interspersed were other entries, written in a different tone. Thomas read one dated October 15th. 23 sick, 21 saved. The power to heal is the power to choose who lives. They don't understand this. They think my knowledge belongs to them because they own my body. But knowledge can't be owned. It can only be shared or withheld. I share it with those who deserve it. I withhold it from those who don't. This is the only power I have, and I wield it carefully. Every life saved is a debt in my favor. Every death prevented is a weight on the scales. When the scales balance, justice will be served. Thomas's hands shook as he turned pages, finding more entries in the same vein. Celia was keeping a ledger of moral debts. She was deciding who was worthy of healing and who was not. Another entry, dated December 20th. The girl came to me in tears. Told me what the men did to her. Told me she wanted him to hurt. I gave her knowledge, as I give all who ask and deserve. Not my place to judge what she does with it. She makes her own choices. Faces her own consequences. But I also gave her something else. Guilt. Planted it deep with careful words. Guilt is slower than poison, but just as deadly. It eats from the inside, destroys the spirit before the body fails. She will not live long. This is mercy, though she doesn't know it yet. Thomas closed the notebook carefully, his mind racing. Celia hadn't directly poisoned Samuel, but she had taught Ruth how, knowing what the girl intended. Then she had driven Ruth to madness and death through psychological manipulation masked as spiritual counsel. He continued searching, and found, wrapped in oilcloth at the box's bottom, a single sheet of yellowed paper covered with different handwriting. My daughter, if you are reading this, I am gone and you carry our knowledge alone. Remember what I taught you. The plants are neither good nor evil. They simply are. We choose how to use them. Use them to heal when the scales are balanced. Use them to harm when justice demands it. But always keep the ledger. Every life saved, every death allowed, every choice made must be recorded and remembered. This is our power and our burden. We are not slaves, though they call us such. We are keepers of the old knowledge, and that knowledge makes us free in ways they cannot understand or take from us. It was signed Phoebe and dated March 1838. Celia's mother. The woman who had taught her daughter not just healing, but a philosophy of selective mercy and calculated revenge. Thomas heard footsteps outside and barely had time to replace everything before Celia entered. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes moving from Thomas to the bed to the hidden box. She knew. "Your wife is asking for you, Master," Celia said quietly. "You should go to her now." "I don't have a wife." "Don't you?" "Then perhaps I misspoke. Hutchins's wife. I meant she's asking for him. Wants to see him before the end." "The end." "The end that comes for us all, Master. Some sooner, some later, but it always comes." She stepped into the cabin, closing the door. "You've been in my things." There was no point denying it. "I have." "Find what you were looking for." "I found notebooks. Records. A letter from your mother." "I know what you've been doing." Celia sat on the bed, moving with weariness. When she spoke, her voice was soft but clear. "My daughter's name was Sarah. She was 17 when she got the pneumonia. Strong girl. Smart. Beautiful. Could have been anything if she'd been born free." She looked at Thomas, tears in her eyes for the first time. Dr. Vance came to see her. He was drunk. I could smell it, see it in his eyes, but he was white and educated, and I was just a slave woman, so my opinion meant nothing. He gave her calomel and ordered bloodletting. I told him it was wrong. He had me whipped for contradicting him. Her hands clenched into fists. I watched my daughter die slowly over 3 days. Watched the calomel poison her, watched the bloodletting drain what little strength she had. She died in agony, calling for me, and I couldn't help because they had tied me up in the barn to teach me respect for white medicine. "I'm sorry," Thomas said, and meant it. "Sorry doesn't balance the scales, Master. Sorry doesn't bring her back or punish the men who killed her through negligence and pride." Her voice hardened. "So I did what I had to do. Dr. Vance died from what looked like influenza complications, but it wasn't influenza. It was foxglove, carefully administered over weeks in doses small enough to mimic heart problems. Marcus died because he helped hold me down for the whipping. Kelly died because he laughed while they beat me. And Peton died because he owned us all, because he created the system that let my daughter die while I watched helplessly." She stood, facing Thomas directly. "I'm not sorry for any of it. They deserved what they got. And if that makes me a murderer in your eyes, then so be it. But I'm also the woman who saved 21 people during the outbreak. I'm the woman who's delivered 37 babies in the past year, losing only 2. The scales balance, Master. That's all I'm trying to do. Balance the scales." Thomas felt trapped between horror and something like admiration. What Celia had done was murder, cold and calculated, but she had also saved countless lives. Was she a monster or a healer? Could she be both? What about Ruth? Ruth came to me for help. I gave her knowledge. She made her own choices. But I also saw in her what I've seen in others who take a life, the guilt that comes after, the way it eats at the mind. I gave her peace, Master. Gave her a way out that was gentler than what she would have suffered otherwise. And Hutchins's wife? Celia's expression was neutral. Everyone dies eventually, Master. The question is when and how and whether they deserve their fate. She paused. Hutchins was overseer at Peton's place before he came here. He supervised my whipping, held the rope himself. You didn't know that, did you? Thomas felt his stomach drop. No. He's not a bad man. Just following orders. But my daughter died while I hung in that barn, and he's part of that chain. So yes, his wife is going to die. Not quickly, not obviously, but inevitably. Call it murder if you want. I call it justice. The cabin seemed darker, though the candle burned as brightly. Thomas realized he stood at a crossroads. He could report what he knew, try to have Celia arrested. But he had no proof beyond notebooks that could be interpreted as philosophical musings. And if he moved against her, who would care for Waverly's sick? What happens now? Thomas asked. That depends on you, master. You can try to stop me, but you won't succeed. Too many people depend on me. Trust me. Move against me and you'll have a rebellion. Or you can look the other way. Let the scales balance themselves and benefit from my skills. Your workers will be healthier, your profits higher. All it costs is your conscience and the lives of a few men who probably deserve what they get. She tilted her head, considering. And if one of those men is me? Are you guilty of anything, master? Have you harmed someone who didn't deserve it? Killed someone through negligence or cruelty? Because if you haven't, you have nothing to fear from me. I don't punish the innocent. I only balance the scales. Thomas thought about his treatment of the people he owned. By slaveholding society's standards, he was decent. But he was still a master, still participating in a system built on human bondage. In Celia's eyes, did that make him guilty? The Waverly Plantation came to you from the previous owner, Celia said softly. Did you ever wonder how he died? Thomas's mouth went dry. Natural causes. That's what I was told. He did. Heart failure from years of hard living. I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't here yet. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. But when Petan's estate was liquidated, I knew where I would end up. Word travels among slaves faster than among masters. I knew Waverly was being sold to a new owner from Charleston. I knew you were young, inexperienced, ambitious. I knew you would need a skilled healer. She moved closer. So I made sure no one else bid on me. Told the other slaves what happened at Petan's. Let them spread the word to their masters. Made myself seem dangerous, cursed, bad luck. So that you, who didn't know any better, would buy me cheap and bring me here, where I could work, heal, teach, and yes, occasionally dispense justice that white courts won't provide. You manipulated me from the beginning. I used the tools available to me, just like you use whips and chains and bills of sale to control us. We each have our weapons, master. Mine are just less obvious. Thomas realized he was trembling, whether from anger or fear, he couldn't say. I could sell you. Send you south, away from everyone you know. You could try. But who would buy me now? Everyone from here to Mobile has heard the stories. And if you sold me, who would care for your sick? Who would deliver your babies? How many people would die before you found someone half as skilled? She smiled without warmth. I've made myself necessary, master. That's the real power, not the ability to kill, but the ability to save. People forgive almost anything from someone who can save lives. The truth struck Thomas like a physical blow. Celia had made herself indispensable, and in doing so, secured a kind of freedom no legal document could provide. She couldn't be sold because she was too valuable. She couldn't be punished because too many people depended on her. So what do you want from me? Thomas asked finally. Nothing you aren't already giving me. Freedom to practice my healing, access to herbs and plants, respect for my knowledge. And one more thing. Her gaze was unwavering. Look the other way when the scales need balancing. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Don't investigate deaths too closely. Let nature take its course. Even when nature has a helping hand. You're asking me to be complicit in murder. I'm asking you to be complicit in justice. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to see it. But think on this, how many slaves die every year from the cruelties of this system? How many are whipped to death, worked to death, bred like animals, sold away from families? And how many masters ever face punishment? The law protects you, not us. So we make our own justice in the only ways available to us. Thomas had no answer. The moral foundation he had built his life on was cracking, revealing contradictions he had never wanted to examine. He was a slave owner who considered himself humane, a participant in an inherently inhumane system. Get out, he said quietly. Leave me alone. Celia nodded and moved toward the door. But before she left, she turned back. Hutchkins's wife will die within a week. After that, Hutchkins will be different, quieter, less efficient. He'll start drinking. The guilt of failing to save her will eat at him. You'll need a new overseer within a year. I'd suggest promoting Daniel. He's smart, fair, and the workers respect him. How do you know all that? Because I've seen it before. Grief follows predictable patterns, especially when mixed with guilt. Hutchkins knows deep down that he's done bad things in his life. His wife's death will make him confront that, and he won't survive the confrontation. She left then, closing the door softly. Thomas stood alone in the cabin for a long time, surrounded by jars of dried herbs and bottles of tinctures, feeling as if he had just touched something ancient and dangerous that he would never fully understand. That